Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really trying to cut through the noise on something big that's unfolding fast. We're talking about the situation around the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, it's moving incredibly quickly.
Exactly. So we've pulled together the latest intelligence, analyses, breaking news, basically everything we can find. The goal here is to give you a clear picture. What's actually happening, why it matters for things like fuel prices, the markets, even your day-to-day, and, well, what might happen
And
next.
it's not just what's happening, but the speed. That's what's striking. The Strait of Hormuz, it's always been called a choke point. But now it feels like it's really at the absolute center of things, with consequences spreading way beyond the region itself.
Okay, so let's walk through how we got here, especially over the last week or so. Things have really put the world on edge. First off, Iran's parliament actually approved closing the Strait of Hormuz. Now, some people used to dismiss that idea, didn't they? Called it scaremongering. Why is this different now?
Well, it's different because it's not just words anymore. It's not happening in a vacuum. This vote came after some pretty serious military actions. We saw the U.S. bombing Iranian nuclear facilities. President Trump made some explicit warnings about more action, too.
Right.
And at the same time, Israel's been hitting targets, IRGC, missile launchers, other sites, quite actively.
IRGC being the Revolutionary Guard Corps.
Exactly. So this vote from the Iranian parliament, it looks less like rhetoric and more like a signal of genuine intent to hit back. It's
Yeah.
an escalation beyond just symbolic stuff.
And then just as we were putting this together, breaking news hit. Iran launched missiles at a U.S. base in Qatar, Al Udeid.
A major base.
Huge, right. That's where USC Anticom headquarters is located. They oversee U.S. operations across the whole Middle East region, plus British military personnel are there.
Iranian media confirmed it, too. 6 missiles, they're saying.
So that feels like a really significant step up.
It really does. If you connect the dots, this Al Udeid attack, it's not just tit for tat. It seems like a very deliberate message from Iran that they're willing to go after major Western assets directly.
And this followed another round of Israeli bombing.
That's right. Israel hits targets. Iran responds this time with 2 waves of long-range missiles and drones. Sirens went off in Israel. Rockets hit. It's really a classic security dilemma playing out in fast forward. Each side sees the other's actions as offensive threats, and it just pushes the accelerator down harder and harder. We're kind of in uncharted waters here.
Okay, so let's break down what this actually means for people listening, for the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz, it's just so critical. What are the numbers again?
Around 20% of the world's entire oil supply goes through that narrow channel.
20%. Wow.
So yeah, even closing it for just a few days, the consequences would be profound. Unbelievable, really.
And it's not just about a complete blockade, is it?
No, exactly. Iran doesn't necessarily need to shut it down completely to cause chaos. They could use targeted strikes, hit individual oil tankers, maybe attack key infrastructure nearby, like the big port of Fujairah. That could also cause massive disruption.
So who gets hit hardest by this?
Well, it really shows how fragile that global energy system is. The U.S., maybe less so these days. They've boosted their own energy production, become more independent. That's a point often emphasized.
Right, the domestic supply argument.
But Asian countries, think China, India, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and Europe too. They rely heavily on that oil flowing consistently from the Gulf. They'd face really severe problems much more directly.
So let's talk potential fallout. Economically, globally, what are we looking at?
It looks pretty stark, honestly. Immediately, you'd expect fuel and energy prices to spike sharply. Oil could surge, some analysts say, to maybe $120, even $150 a barrel, and fast, like within a day or two of a major disruption.
Okay, $150 oil. That would cause panic, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Panic in global shipping, definitely. Insurance markets would go wild. And you'd see rapid naval mobilization from various countries.
And that's just the immediate reaction. What about the medium term? Say, a few weeks in.
Well, that's where things could get really dicey for global supply. Oil supplies could actually start running dry in different parts of the world. Then you're looking at gas prices, at the pump, and general inflation surging into what some analyses are calling absolute chaos, extreme economic instability.
And longer term, if this somehow dragged on for, say, 2 or 3 months.
The scenarios get very grim. We could be talking about a global recession. Some even mention the possibility of a depression.
Wow.
Central banks might lose their grip on inflation. You could see emerging markets collapsing, widespread civil unrest, even potentially governments becoming unstable or actually collapsing in some nations that are particularly vulnerable.
And defense spending.
You'd expect a massive surge in global defense spending. Everyone's scrambling to protect their interests, secure shipping lanes, maybe build up stockpiles.
Okay, turning to the financial markets. Are we seeing reactions already?
Yes, oil markets are definitely reacting to the uncertainty. Prices are moving. And in this kind of situation, you typically see gold prices go up significantly.
The safe haven asset.
Exactly. Money flows there when things look unstable. On the flip side, global stock markets would almost certainly fall, maybe quite sharply.
Hmm.
But defense stocks? They likely do well. Companies making weapons, surveillance tech, that sort of thing, increased demand is expected.
Right. Makes sense. Now, geopolitically, how would the big powers react to a serious closure attempt?
Swiftly and decisively. That seems to be the consensus. Western powers, the U.S., the U.K., France, they've basically said they would never allow a full closure.
So military action is almost guaranteed?
It seems highly likely. Immediate military mobilization. You'd see the U.S. Fifth Fleet, which is right there in Bahrain, get involved. The U.K. Royal Navy, the French Navy too, probably initial airstrikes targeting Iranian naval assets, missile sites, command centers. Then likely naval convoys to escort tankers, maybe special operations forces to secure key points along the strait.
And sanctions. Iran's already under heavy sanctions.
They'd get ramped up even further. Whatever levers are left would be pulled, trying to increase the economic pressure to crippling levels.
What about NATO? Could the whole alliance get pulled in?
That's a very real possibility, especially because of that attack on the U.S. base in Qatar and Udaid. If that attack is seen as triggering Article 5 of the NATO treaty.
The Collective Defense Clause attack on one is an attack on all.
Exactly. That changes the game entirely. The U.K. has already deployed more forces to the region. They've signaled NATO readiness. They've got RAF Typhoon jets positioned nearby. And they've explicitly said an attack on U.S. bases could be interpreted as an attack on a NATO ally. So the potential for this to widen is significant.
Okay, with that risk of a wider conflict, what about other key players, Russia and China? What are they likely to do? Their interests are involved too.
It's a really interesting dynamic there. The thinking is they'd likely try to quietly pressure Iran to back down, to de-escalate, China especially. They need that oil flowing through Hormuz, huge amounts of it.
Right.
Now, ironically, disruption could actually benefit Russia, couldn't it? If Gulf supplies are cut, maybe China buys more Russian oil?
Potentially.
But overall, stability is probably better for both in the long run. There are reports Iran asked Putin for military help. Russia seems, well, not very interested. They're likely focused on Ukraine. Plus, historically, Russia has bought military gear from Iran, like drones, not really giving them major aid. So it shows the kind of pragmatic, self-interested calculations going on.
What about Iran's neighbors? Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, they must be incredibly nervous.
Oh, absolutely nervous. But they'd probably still side with the U.S., ultimately. They'd likely try to increase their own oil production to help stabilize markets, even though they definitely fear Iranian retaliation. They're right there in the line of fire.
And there's another angle here too, isn't there? The bigger picture, the global chessboard.
Yes. Some analyses point to a really worrying possibility. If the U.S. gets deeply bogged down in a major, prolonged conflict in the Middle East, could China see that as an opportunity?
To move on Taiwan?
That's the concern raised in some quarters. A moment of perceived U.S. distraction or overextension. It adds another layer of high-stakes global tension to this.
And the impact isn't just geopolitical or economic. It's hitting closer to home for many people too, right?
Definitely. We're already seeing heightened terror alerts being issued. Major Western cities mentioned include London, Berlin, Paris, New York, L.A., Seattle, Washington, D.C. The FBI, other security services, they're putting out warnings about potential cells being activated.
And there are specific concerns being voiced about internal security too.
Yes, about sleeper cells potentially already inside the U.S. Some reports mention concerns about individuals who might have crossed borders, particularly in what are known as sanctuary cities.
Those are the places with policies limiting cooperation with federal immigration enforcement.
Right, so that adds another layer of complexity for intelligence agencies who are already working flat out trying to track and prevent any potential attacks.
Meanwhile, inside Iran itself, what's happening? Is there opposition?
There are reports, yes. Underground opposition groups are apparently trying to mobilize. Things like initiating shutdowns, distributing pamphlets, using encrypted messaging apps to organize resistance against the regime. How effective that is hard to say from the outside.
And one more very practical impact, especially if you travel internationally. Airspace.
Yeah, that's already started. The UAE, United Arab Emirates, has closed its airspace. That means airlines based there like Air Arabia, Etihad, Fly Dubai, they're grounded or heavily rerouted. That's going to cause significant disruption for global air travel passing through a major hub.
So putting this all together, it's an incredibly complex situation, escalating fast, and the connections just spread everywhere.
Absolutely. It really highlights how interconnected everything is. Geopolitics, the global economy, energy security, even domestic security.
Tensions in one narrow strait can send ripples or maybe tsunamis through everything, impacting daily life in ways we might not immediately expect.
Hmm.
So, as we navigate this period of real uncertainty, staying well informed feels more critical than ever.
Definitely.
But in a world where things can change so quickly, where these geopolitical currents can reshape markets and maybe even daily routines almost instantly, how do we even process it all?
That's the big question, isn't it? How do you sort reliable information from the noise when events are unfolding so rapidly?
And maybe think about what strategies, personally or even collectively, can help us prepare for these kinds of unexpected shifts, something to really mull over.